Hey everyone, my name is Christine Kreischer. I'm one of the pastors at GT Church and your host for the Growing Together podcast, where we bring you new episodes every Wednesday to give you a midweek boost of encouragement and inspiration that will motivate you to live out your faith and to put your faith into practice, to not just be hearers of the word, but doers of the word. So at GT Church, we're in a sermon series right now called the Red Letter Challenge, and it's been incredible. In this past Sunday's message, Pastor Scott talked about the power of forgiveness, which is why I'm so excited to be hanging out with my friend Danae Fanjoy today. Her and her husband are the leaders of our Celebrate Recovery group here at GT Church. And the core, really one of the key things in Celebrate Recovery is this power of forgiveness. And so, Danae, thank you so much for being with me today and for just being willing to share with us. Will you start out just by telling us a little bit about, for some people, they have no idea what Celebrate Recovery is. And so tell us a little bit about Celebrate Recovery.
Sure. So Celebrate Recovery is a faith-based 12-step program. So a lot of people are familiar with maybe some of the secular programs, AA, NA, some of the others. So this is going to look very similar. The difference is that it is all biblically based. All of our lessons, all of our teachings, all of the principles come straight from the Bible. Mm-hmm. So whereas you may have heard with other 12-step programs, they use more generic terms. And instead of saying higher power in Celebrate Recovery, we say Jesus Christ, because we believe that that is the only higher power. Mm-hmm. So essentially what it looks like is just broken people walking through life situations with other broken people and kind of offering accountability and support, and then us all drawing from truth to trust God to work out of us the things that he wants to work out of us.
I love that. And I love kind of the tag for Celebrate Recovery is helping people find freedom from challenging hurts, hangups, and habits of any kind, right?
Yeah.
Say a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions about Celebrate Recovery is that it is specifically for people who struggle with addiction. And while it does definitely reach people who struggle with any form of addiction, I mean, you just said it, the tagline right there, it is for any hurt, habit, or hang up. So it could be people who struggle with depression. It could be people who are having marital issues, insecurity, codependency. Literally, I cannot think of a single thing that wouldn't fall under one of those headings of a hurt, a habit, or a hang up. So it is for any issue that you just feel like this is something I don't feel like I've been able to get victory over. Yeah.
Yeah, so it has that component of that biblical community of, I love when you said that, broken people just trying to help broken people, right? It's kind of like beggars just showing others where to get the bread. That's what we all are.
Absolutely.
So good. I'm so grateful for you and Michael and for your ministry at GT through Celebrate Recovery. It's powerful. And yeah, tell me, how did you find your way to Celebrate Recovery? What was it for you that brought you there?
So, Celebrate Recovery has been a huge part of my testimony. And I guess I'll share just a little bit of that to kind of give a little background of what brought me to this ministry. I was raised in a Christian home, went to Christian school my whole life. Very blessed to have that kind of protective nature, in my childhood and in my upbringing. However, I always carried around just this feeling of I'm never good enough. I need to do more for God. God is always disappointed in me. And just basically this, I'm insignificant, I don't really matter. I'm not seen, that kind of a thing. And so this lie really that I was carrying around just kind of grew more and more over time. And my way of trying to protect myself from that was just to try harder. If I just do a little more, if I just work a little harder, then I'll outrun that lie. I won't feel that shame. I won't feel that inadequacy anymore. And that didn't work. Really what it did was just end up wearing me out and causing me to kind of form a resentment towards God why do you say these things in your word? And yet I'm doing all these things to please you. And yet I don't feel you in the way that I want to feel you, or I don't see you in the way that I want to see you. And so, you know, what started out as I'll just try harder eventually became, what's the point? Because it doesn't make a difference. So, I had gotten married really young and, you know, quickly got into my career, which is counseling and psychology, and started working in the drug and alcohol field. And through just a series of, you know, I guess a process kind of gradually falling away, a process of just surrounding myself with more worldly influence than godly influence. I just really started to get deceived in my mind of thinking, you know, the ways of the church and the ways of God are oppressive, and those are the things that make me feel that I'm not good enough, and the way of the world is freedom, and that's where I'm going to find happiness, that's where I'm going to find my true identity. And so really just in this bad place of, you know, really feeding on lies. And, you know, having struggles in my marriage too. And just long story short, I ended up falling into an affair with one of my clients that I was working with. And, you know, there's a whole lot more that's involved in that without trying to get into too much detail. But really, the gist of it was that I no longer trusted that God, one, I didn't trust that he saw me. I didn't trust that he really genuinely cared about me and loved me. I felt that I was always disappointing him, but I also didn't trust that he was going to satisfy me. You know, that these things that I had, in this emptiness and this void and this hurt that I had in me, I had to fix it myself. And I had to go to the world to do that. And that got me into a lot of trouble and took me down a path that caused a lot of hurt in my life and in the people that I loved in their lives as well.
Wow.
So that is what brought me to Celebrate Recovery. When I got to the point in my journey when I was just broken, I was, you know, I had nothing else left in me. I had no other tricks up my sleeve, nothing else to turn to. And I just realized I need help. I can't do this. There is something wrong inside of me and I don't know how to fix it. And I need help.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times that we refer to that as like hitting rock bottom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So what was that moment like for you though?
That was a hard moment up until that point in my life, because so much of my relationship with God was legalism. And, you know, I had no comprehension of grace. I could talk about it, but I didn't know what it meant because I didn't really feel like I needed it, as silly as that sounds to say, because in my mind, up until that point, my sins were like the little sins, you know, like I struggled with jealousy, or I struggled with, you know, insecurity or whatever, but it was always, I'll just work harder to fix that. I'll just work harder to not be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until that point in my life when I was like, how did I even get here? You know, this is so out of character for me. That was so like, I never in a million years thought that I was capable of doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then that was the point where I was like, I really need grace. I really need a savior in my life. But it was hard because it was humbling. You know, it was humbling to accept that there really is nothing good in me. It really is all about Jesus. It really is all about what he did for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a relief, but it was also just this like laying down of everything that I had held on to as my security up until that point.
Yeah. It sounds like it's that place of, isn't it the first step?
Yes.
Recovery.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that. What's the first step?
So the first step is we admit that we are powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors and that our lives have become unmanageable.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the process of stepping out of denial, which for me was admitting like, okay, I don't have this. I cannot control my life. I cannot control my sin. I can't outrun it.
Mm-hmm.
And so admitting that, stepping out of denial and saying, I need help, basically.
Yeah. What do you think it is that keeps people from taking that step?
I think that it's a scary step to take. It's scary to admit that you are powerless, because admitting that you're powerless, oftentimes there's a surrender that comes along with that, whether you're surrendering a vice of yours, whether you're surrendering just an idea that you have of how you are or how together you are. I think it's vulnerability, and vulnerability can be really scary.
Yeah. And I think too, I know for me, it's pride.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just want to go, like we can get so caught up in doing, and we can get so caught up in believing that we have to do it all. And I got this, I got this, I got this. When really God is saying, no, 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 I've got you. I'm
Right.
holding you in the very palm of my hands. I want to be the Lord of your life. And I love that word that you said, surrender, right? Just admitting, like hands up. It's why we raise our hands when we worship, right? It's like hands up, fully surrendered. Lord, all I have is yours. And it's that first, again, like I talk about this all the time. I feel like a broken record, but that, first rung on the ladder of the Beatitudes is poor in spirit, admitting our need for God. That's why I love it's the first step, in recovery. It's just listen, I don't have this figured out. I need you, Lord. It's so good.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of trust too, because it's easier when we are doing things and when we feel like, we can produce these things or we can manage things. It's easier to kind of feel confident about those things rather than just trusting who God says we are and letting that be enough without all the extra stuff that we feel that we have to bring to the table. It can be hard to let go of those things and to really have that trust of I'm enough because God says I'm enough, not because I'm adding all of these extra things.
That's right. Yeah. I love that. And you talked about grace. So for people, I remember when I first surrendered my life to Jesus and said, okay, I don't have this, my life is out of control and it's all falling apart. And I reached that rock bottom and just cried out to God and said, I give up. I surrender. I need you. I didn't understand that word grace. And it took me a long time to not just understand what the word meant, but to really live loved, to really live out of that place of grace. So can you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is my favorite topic to talk about because for so long, I didn't get it either. And to me, grace was, God forgave me for my sins so that I could go to heaven, but he was always just still disappointed in me. Like his work was that he saved me, he died on the cross so I could go to heaven, but now I have to live out the things in the Bible in my strength. And when I don't, then he's just, he's disappointed. Like, how many times do I have to teach you this? How many times are we going to go over it? So for me, learning about grace was learning that it's not just about salvation, but it's also entirely about sanctification. So anything that he asks me or instructs me to do in his word, he only does it because he empowers me to do it. It never is about me doing these things to please him or to, anything other than it's him working through me because I am one with Christ. And that is the only reason that any of it works.
Yeah.
And I just love that because it's rest, it's just rest and trust in who he is and who we are in him. That's it. It's not, if it's striving, then it's not grace. And it took me a really long time to learn that because I'm really good at striving. I'm really good at, at being disciplined and following the rules and checking the boxes. Like that's easy for me. That's comfortable. But to lay that stuff down and to let my confidence and my rest be in God saying, I love you and I forgive you. And I'm going to be the one that works these things out in you. I'm the one that started the process. I'm the one that's going to carry it to completion. That's harder to do. That takes a lot more faith, So, but I love it because the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, wow, this is good. Like this just feels good. This is peace. This is victory. This is serenity. This is all the things I've been longing for. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's freedom, right?
Yes, it's
That is
freedom.
freedom.
Yes.
You made me think when you were talking, there's a quote by A.W. Tozer, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but he says the most important thing about us is what we think about God.
Mm.
And I think that's so powerful. I preached a message a few years ago, and it was about, is your view askew? Is your
Yeah.
view of God askew? Because our view of God, what we think of God and how we envision God really does determine whether we can really accept God's grace and forgiveness. Because if our view of God is that he's this big Zeus, basically,
Yeah.
right? This
Yeah.
big angry God in heaven with a scepter and just like waiting for us to mess up, to say, you did it again. You said the word disappointment, right? Like
Yeah.
how many of us walk around feeling like we are constantly disappointing someone or God, even bigger, right? And
Right.
that's a heavy burden to carry because you can't accept God's grace and forgiveness and love and walk and live in that love if
Yeah.
you're seeing God as a punishing God, if you're seeing God as an angry God, if you're seeing God as just waiting for you to mess up so that he can slap your hands, um,
Right.
but if your view of God, I love, love, love when Jesus says that he is the exact representation of his Father and he is love,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, man, sometimes we really need to take some time to just get alone with God and say, all right, what is it that I think about you? How do I view you? And
Yeah.
does that line up with Jesus and how Jesus represented you? And I think that's powerful because that
It is.
perception changes everything and allows us to then live differently and to,
Yeah.
like you said, the peace and serenity.
Yeah,
Ooh,
absolutely. That's so good. And I think of, even just in talking about the topic of forgiveness, if we see that God reluctantly forgives us, or he
mhm.
forgives us, but he's like, you know, there
Yeah.
you did it
Again.
again, right. That event that we can exhaust his grace, if we see it like that, then that instantly puts us in a place of shame.
Yes.
And the problem is that shame never, ever, ever produces growth for us. It never produces victory, like I think
Mhm.
we think it will sometimes. Like if I just feel bad enough, then that will be my motivation to change, but it never is. It just becomes this cycle. If that's how I see myself, then that's how I act. That's how I treat other people. And where can forgiveness be in that equation? It can't.
Mm-hmm. Say more about that because I know that forgiveness is a huge part of your story.
Mhm.
Yeah. So say a little bit more about that.
So up until that point in my life, I would say that shame was really a major thing that I carried around. Shame like really was my identity, and as I
Wow.
said, my kind of way of trying to overcome that was I will just try to be more. I'll just try to do more, and I knew like there was a point that I had come to um, immediately. So what I had done had become very public. Many people found out about it. Those people told other people, and it just kind of spread. Like what I had done, the story just kind of spread like wildfire, which was really, really a difficult moment for me because my reputation was everything to me. And in an instant, like it was just completely trashed.
Mm.
And it was hard for me too because I wasn't getting to share my story. People were hearing my story from other people and things were being added to it that just weren't true at all.
Wow.
So I remember having this moment of just kind of being like overwhelmed by that, overwhelmed by the shame of what people were thinking about me, my reputation being trashed. Where do I go from here? What's going to happen, with my marriage, all these different things. And I had no choice in that moment. Like literally, I felt like it was a choice between life or death. If I stay in this shame, it's death. That's it. There is no escape from this for me. There's no way I can out, work it. There's no way I can good deed my way out of this one. Or I can choose to turn to what God says about me is true, that he forgives me. He forgives me time after time after time. My sin is as far as the east is from the west. I can choose to believe that. And I had just enough faith to say, okay, God, I'm going to choose to believe that this is true. And I'm going to take this first step with you. And that first step led to another step, which led to another step. And each step brought on more revelation and more insight of, I was not my sin, first of all, that he never saw me as my sin. And I didn't need to carry around that shame because he gave me a new identity. And I was becoming more and more of who he said that I was. Mm-hmm. And that was freedom for me. So it was easier for me to take the shame that I felt about what other people thought about me and just say that doesn't, they can think those things about me, and they might even have a place to think those things about me, but that doesn't have to be my identity anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't have to align myself with what they think about me. I can align myself with scripture and what God says about me. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that, then that frees you to be able to forgive other people. Kind of like the parable that Pastor Scott was preaching about, this past Sunday, is I think the idea is when we realize how much we've been forgiven of, then we no longer feel the need to hold other people hostage. Yeah. But when there's a disconnect in our minds, if I didn't believe that God truly forgave me, if I continued to hold on to, well, he's still really upset with me and I still really blew it and he's still angry, then I wouldn't receive forgiveness. And so then I couldn't offer that forgiveness to other people. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, it makes total sense. I'll never forget learning, because I carried around, just as you're describing, so much shame because of my past and decisions that I had made. And I mean, I could list, go on and on about the mess I had made of my life. And just carrying around that guilt and that shame. And my view of God was very much, from the time I was young, I would hear things like I would stub my toe and my grandmother would say, see, that's what you get for talking back to your mother earlier. Like she didn't mean that. That wasn't her intention. But that fed that lie and that view of God. My view was completely askew. Yeah. And so I'm walking around with shame, and I'll never forget the first time someone saying, Jesus died for you. He died for you before you ever said you were sorry or even thought about getting your life right and putting things together. And so for me, then it became and I don't want to say it's an easy response, but it's almost like not a natural response, but a kind of like, okay, so when somebody hurts me, I don't have to wait until they say they're sorry. Like my stepfather, I mean, the way that I was raised and the way that he raised me and the things that happened and the things that he said, that just, I remember having so much rage and hatred toward that man as a young adult. And then realizing that, you know what, even if he never says he was sorry, then when I decided to follow Jesus and learned what Jesus had done for me, this was the moment of like, if he never says he's sorry, I have to forgive him. Yeah. Because Jesus didn't withhold forgiveness from me before I said I was sorry. And so now, like, okay, this is what picking up your cross and following Jesus looks like. And then I also realized, I remember Pastor Brian he used this visual years ago that was so powerful when it came to forgiveness. He just said, when you are holding unforgiveness in your heart, you're withholding forgiveness for somebody that has hurt you, justified. It doesn't matter, right? Like, it's like they're standing next to you and they haven't said they're sorry. They've hurt you. You're standing there wounded and full of rage and unforgiveness. And it's like you have poison in your hands, and you pick up the poison and you're drinking it and you're drinking it and you're drinking it. And they're just standing next to you, completely like oblivious. Yeah. You're drinking the poison, and unforgiveness is making you sick. Yeah. And it's, and it's keeping you from experiencing, like what you talked about, the peace and forgiveness and love of God. Right. And so let it go. And it sometimes is a decision before it's a feeling, right?
Absolutely.
But I've
Yes.
found forgiveness is like, I'm deciding to forgive you. I'm saying I canceled the debt because Jesus canceled mine.
Yeah.
And then my feelings will eventually, hopefully follow. And they do. It's happened every time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that just on that point, if you are in that place, or I've found in my life, when I am in that place where I know I'm holding on to bitterness and resentment and I need to forgive, but my feelings aren't lining up, that it's 100% okay for me to just say, God, this is where I'm at. And I know I shouldn't be here. I know that I'm hurting myself. I know that I'm the one that's not living in freedom right now, but I cannot do this on my own. I cannot stop holding on to this. And I think that, a lot of times when it's hard for us to forgive, I think there can be a trust issue there, that we don't trust, God, if I give this to you, that you are going to work it out and you're not going to just let me be the one that was slighted or the one that was, whatever the situation is, that you're actually going to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I trust that he's going to take care of me, then it's easier for me to put it into his hands.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's okay to be honest and just say, like, I'm not there right now, God. I want to be. Help me to get there, And he does. He's faithful to come and meet us right where we are and help us get to where he wants us to go.
I'm so glad you said that, because I know that sometimes it can feel cliche, right? Well, just forgive. Jesus forgave you, so just forgive. That doesn't mean don't grieve. That doesn't mean don't feel the pain.
Yeah.
That means, for me, I'm choosing to forgive and release you and cancel you of the debt. But I'm also trusting that Jesus is going to meet me and hold me in my pain, in my sorrow, in my grief, and allow him to be the healer of my soul instead of waiting for somebody else. Because even there's been times where there's been people that have hurt me, and hearing the words, I'm sorry, I thought that was going to be the magic and make it all feel better, but it doesn't. Right. Like, so Jesus is the one that can come and meet you and hold you and just be with you in that place of pain. And that takes time, and that's a process. But
Absolutely.
because you forgive, but you don't forget.
Right.
You move into forgiveness, helps you to move into a different chapter and to move forward. But it's not, I don't believe in closure. I think that's just, no, it's the new thing, right? It's letting go so that you can step into the new thing that God has for you.
Yeah.
That's what he does.
Yeah, that's good. Definitely.
So tell me, what do you think, as we wrap up here in the next couple of minutes, how can Celebrate Recovery help someone that maybe is struggling with shame and unforgiveness, having a hard time of letting go to maybe things that were done to them or decisions that they've made that have gotten them into that mess that we talked about, where we were both like at this place of like, I've messed it all up. Where do I go from here? How does Celebrate Recovery help?
So I think one of the most beautiful things about Celebrate Recovery is it is a place where it's not only allowed, but it is very encouraged to come and be just 100% honest and authentic and just even raw, And there is a really beautiful thing that happens when I can sit down and share with someone else, look, this is the shame that I'm feeling right now. This is the shame that I've been carrying around, and even not even having it all figured out, not even being able to present it as like, well, I'm going through this, but I know God is teaching me this and it will turn into this. Even just saying like, this is what I'm going through. It's terrible. I don't like it. I'm mad at God right now, whatever it is that you're feeling, and have a group of people that say, we're there with you. We support you. We have our own stuff, and we're going to love you through this process. That is freeing, because when we try to carry shame around, when we try to hide our shame or cover it up or overcompensate or whatever, it never goes away. It just stays in us, and it comes out in these very broken ways, these ways that just end up hurting us and hurting others and just creating damage in our lives. But when we can be honest about what we're carrying around and where we're at and what we're going through, and have the support and the accountability of other people who are going to encourage us to keep reaching towards truth, to keep believing the things that Christ says, and to keep pursuing those things, that is the avenue to freedom. And so that is, in a nutshell, what my journey has been like with Celebrate Recovery. To be quite honest, when I first went to Celebrate Recovery, I wasn't even in a place where I was fully repentant of my sin. There was still a very large part of me that wanted to hold on to the things that I had gotten myself involved with, because I still believed that was my happiness. And it wasn't, until being in the program a little while, as I started to share my story with people, that it began to lose its power over me. The lie and the deception that I was believing began to lose its power, because what I was seeing was other people who had real struggles and real hurts, who were gaining freedom and gaining victory. And I was like, that's what I want, and that encouraged me to keep going in my own journey. And, eventually, thankfully, because God is gracious, he lifted those obsessions that I was carrying around, and he helped me to see truth, and helped my feelings and my heart to align with, where my feet were walking in faith. So, yeah.
That is so good. It sounds so refreshing, because it's a judgment-free zone, right? Absolutely. I loved when you said the word raw. I heard somebody once describe Celebrate Recovery as they said they've been to great church services they love, but for them, Celebrate Recovery is their church. Like, it's church because it's, like you said earlier, it's broken people trying to help broken people. And there's a level of vulnerability and a level of rawness that is so refreshing. And it reminds me of when Jesus would sit around with the disciples, right? And they would just have conversations, and they would ask him really hard, raw, crazy, ridiculous questions that now we're like, seriously, did you say that to Jesus? Really. But we all have those things. And to have that place, I think sometimes we come to church and we put on our Sunday best and we put that smile on our face, and we walk in and we worship and we hear the word and we walk out with smiles. And then we live in our raw, vulnerable lives. And so to have a safe community to come to and say, I don't have all this figured out, I messed up, or I messed up, and like, I need help, and I just need to be honest about my feelings. Whoa, I feel like that's where the healing comes. That's why life change happens. I think in a dramatic way in environments like that. They're like our small groups. We talk about that. Let the walls come on down and just be real and wrestle, say the hard things, say you're mad at God. I loved when you said that. Like, there are times where we feel frustrated. I have times in my life where I'm like, God, what's going on here? What are you doing? And then, and that's part of the journey, being real. I love that so much.
Yeah. And there is, I would say that, Celebrate Recovery feels like family in the best possible sense, just a group of people that no matter what, at the end of the day, they love you, they're sticking with you. And, there's just such a warmth there, there's such a warmth. And two, like, if being vulnerable and being raw is absolutely terrifying, you can come and you don't have to do that at first. You can wait until you feel comfortable. But what I've heard from the majority of people that have come is they come in and there's a presence there, there's a presence where it's okay to be you here, and that almost inspires people to just be like, okay, I want to be honest about the things that are going on in my heart, because there's a level of trust there. So it's a beautiful thing that God does.
That's awesome. Yeah. Nobody's forced to share, like, okay, it's your turn, you go. No, you can sit back and you can just take it all in. And when you're ready, that's when you do it. So good. So if somebody's interested in Celebrate Recovery, Danae, what's their first step? How do they get involved? What can they expect?
Yeah. So as far as, just kind of figuring out when and where we meet and all that stuff, 2 places you can look. One is GT's website, and then the other is we have a Facebook page. It's called CR at GT. So you can follow us. We're constantly giving updates about, just different things, that meeting times, and if we need to change meetings or whatever, we post encouragement on that website or on that Facebook page as well. As far as what to expect, so there's 2 parts to our meeting. The first part, we are all together in one large room and we have a time of worship. And then we have either a testimony, someone who has been through Celebrate Recovery and has experienced victory in their lives will stand up and share a testimony, or we have a teaching that is based on the 12 principles. Again, those come right from the Bible. They're actually right from the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. So we have teachings on those. After that time, we split out into what we call our open share groups. And those are always going to be gender specific. And we try to make them as issue specific as we possibly can. So we'll have a women's group, we'll have a men's group. And that is the time where you get an opportunity to share whatever it is that's on your heart to share. And one of the different things about Celebrate Recovery is that we're very careful to not try to fix one another, because that can lead into a whole other host of problems that we don't want to get into. Mm-hmm. So you are able to share what you have to share with other people listening and supporting you, but it's not going to be, oh yeah, I went through that too, let me tell you what helped me. That's not what the format's going to look like. Wow. That doesn't mean that, you can't form those relationships and those kinds of things can't also be a part of it. It's just not a part of our open share time. We try to keep that very protected, just letting the person share what they need to share, uninterrupted, unjudged, because there's a lot that happens in that process that is very, very healing and very powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what our meetings look like. And then other things that can be expected is just really genuine relationships and, just like we were talking about, just a place of feeling accepted and loved and, that you're broken, but it's okay because we're all broken and we're all doing this thing together.
That's right. Oh, yep. That's so good. Oh, Danae, thank you so much. So remind us again. So it's the gtchurch.online, the website. Yep. There's an event section there. And then you said it's CR at GT on Facebook.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to just share with us, share your story, because it's powerful. Forgiveness it's the key, right? It's the key. Yeah. It's how Jesus lived and what he modeled for us. And so
absolutely.
I'm so thankful for that. So if you'd like to learn more about Celebrate Recovery, like we said, you can find information on our website, and you can also visit the Celebrate Recovery at GT Church Facebook page. And if you missed Pastor Scott's message from this past Sunday, guys, it's all about forgiving. You can go back and watch on our website, our Facebook page, or our YouTube channel. And speaking of not missing out, join us next week when I interview our special guest, Kim Geddes. Kim Geddes is the Serve Director. She's the queen of all things volunteerism at GT Church. And we're going to talk a little bit about the legacy that her husband, Mark, lived. He was a servant and just an incredible man of God. And we're going to talk about what serving does for your life and how it impacts you and is such a catalyst for spiritual growth. And we just want you to be a part of all that God is doing for the kingdom or in the kingdom. So thanks again for joining us today. And I'll see you next week for the next episode of Growing Together.